have the Ayatollah of fantasy rock and roll with us today, Adam Rank. How you doing, Rank?
They look great in person, and I just can't wait till next year we can pack it full of 25,000.
Hey, Bob, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. I didn't know it was Ball Guys Day. It was being ranked. I mean, how can you lose?
This is the Dynasty Vipers Vipercast.
And welcome back to the Dynasty Vipers Vipercast, presented by the Fantasy Points Media Group. And now it is time to go behind the grind with the Podfather himself, Matt Kelley. Matt, are you ready?
I gotta know though, Major. Did I swing you at all? Did I
No.
make you doubt Isaiah Spiller at all?
No.
Anything I said resonate?
No, not at all.
You've heard it all before.
Yeah.
You've heard it all before.
No, I'm with you. I'm with you, man. But I do appreciate his on the field of his video. You know what I mean? I like his footage. I like his running style. You know, we'll see. I'm not a numbers guy.
If he goes second round, I'm a much bigger fan.
There you
than
go.
If he goes fifth round.
There you go.
But it's up in the air
capital
now.
Matters,
it's
right?
officially
Draft
up in the
capital
air.
Matters.
Draft capital matters more for running backs. We
Mm.
have an app called the Breakout Finder, and runs a model on all these input factors, and the draft capital factor on running backs is enormous, and it matters so much more. Like the fact that Josh Jacobs is guaranteed to be productive in the league, even if he's not actually deserving of that. He plays well. He's a solid player. He's actually played a lot better lately. He's really grown into the role, but he should have been like a third rounder and like I said, developed into it. And then he'd actually have more tread on the tire at this point.
Right.
But if you go in the first round, the NFL is almost going to, unless you tear your knees 10 different ways, like Rashad Penny, they're going to make you break out somehow, some way. And then Rashad Penny still stuck around, and you could still argue that he was super fantasy relevant last year against all odds.
Breakout this year. Everyone's calling his breakout for this.
And now he's going to break out. He's going to have 1,000-yard season this year. It's going to be an official breakout. So this is what I'm talking about. The NFL won't let these first rounders die. Even Trent Richardson had a breakout rookie year.
Great point.
That is also true. And we know that you
crazy.
We know that you love to talk profiles here, prospects, this and that. Another thing that I'm sure we can get a little bit of conversation going is about you here. And the first thing we're going to talk about is if you were making that entrance to the wrestling ring, because I know you got that persona out there right now, you're coming down the wrestling ring or you're coming in the ninth inning. What is that music that we are going to cue up for the Podfather to come on down?
Oh, you know what? I just did my first soccer podcast. It just dropped this morning. Talked to Paul Monwaring. He's from Liverpool, and he had just had the perfect sort of disposition. He had the British accent. It was so perfect. And we're eventually going to do. We're going to start doing more soccer content. A lot of green grass there. The soccer fantasy is their growth has really been restricted for a bunch of reasons. But it's an international sport that I think a lot of people are very interested in. So I think it makes a lot of sense. I'm getting interested in it. So the music to start that podcast was this, that song, Ole, 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 ole. I love that, man. I love that. And then ole, ole. And then the drums start. Ole. And it's like, listen, man.
Wait, is that a song or is that just a chant?
It's
Just
a chant but there's been, 10 different EDM versions of that as a song, as a dance song or whatever, right? For the clubs. But it is sort of a chant, but that's what I want. I want a full stadium chanting ole, ole, ole when I come out. That's what I want.
Got it.
It is intense. I'm a big time Montreal Canadiens fan. I've been to Montreal to catch a hockey game here and there. That is one of their chants they bust out when they have the lead late in the third period. Kind of like, hey, the rest of you, get the heck on out of here. We're going to start doing our thing. So
it feels good, doesn't it?
It is. It's fantastic.
Yeah, so let's talk about
It's a feel
you
good.
as a kid, as a youth here. Did you play any sports growing up?
Yeah, I played all the sports. I broke my arm playing what it was. I think my freshman year football, and then didn't go back. I was really mad though because I picked up tennis and golf instead of I don't know. I should have. I regret not like uh, sticking with football. I really do because in my senior year, I used to play football in the parking lot with a bunch of my friends that were on the team. We always play, and they almost convinced me to play my senior year. But I was like, listen, man, it's I've been out of it for years. I wish I was more confident back then in my abilities and just to be on the team, just to be a supporter on the bench.
Right.
That's what I should have done. So that sort of stuck with me as a regret. They won the state championship that year.
Oh man.
So it was really fucking terrible.
Yeah.
Like I was watching and I was just like, my gut was like, I want to be out there so bad. And I think that's one of the reasons why, I take more chances now. I sort of go for it when I have the opportunity. Just because there's just been situations I've been in, like that was a good example where I played it safe, right? I didn't embrace the unknown, and then I look up and I'm like, ah, damn it, So I
Who?
did I made some money investing, right? To day trading ish type, and I had about 50 grand put together from that. And I said, you know what? Like, of course I didn't tell my wife or anything. I didn't tell anybody what I was doing or maybe one friend, just because everyone would have been like, don't do that. Like, keep it invested or whatever. And I was like, no, I have an idea. I really think that the world needs this thing, player profiler. So I'm going to, get the funding together to build this thing. And now it's worked out. But at the time I wasn't telling anybody because I was, shy about it and sure they would try to like talk me out of it
Right.
because on its face, it sounded ridiculous and like a total waste of money.
Yeah. But who's some of your favorite players and teams growing up? Who did you root for as a kid?
So when I was a kid, you couldn't just watch any football game. There were only 2 football games on. It was the Patriots, we were in Maine, and then we got the Giants, right? And that was it. It was either you watch the Patriots or the Giants. And so everyone was either a Patriots or a Giants fan. And it wasn't the Jets because it was where the market was. So the AFC teams, we always watched Patriots games. So, I mean, that's all kids had were like Giants jerseys or Patriots jerseys and shirts, because those are literally the only games you could watch. I don't remember when Monday Night Football started. I don't remember. I was probably too young to even stay up and watch Monday Night Football. So literally that was it. But watch it with my dad and my grandfather, watching the Patriots, Steve Grogan, Irving Fryer. That was growing up. And then that feeling when they beat the Rams was incredible. I don't know. I think I almost had a little bit more of a visceral response to the Malcolm Butler interception though, because it was just, I mean, I think it's now sort of been so many years and it's been forgotten about a little bit, but it was so surprising. I was so dead sure that, especially after that curse catch where he kicked it up in the air and it bounced off his knee and it bounced off his shoulder. When they complete that catch to curse in that spot and then they get to the 1 yard line, everybody that has ever watched the NFL knows game's over. It's
Right.
over. It's over. It's 100% over. They're scoring. You would bet everything on it. You'd bet the money you paid to build player profiler on it, whatever. And then it didn't happen. And then somehow, like, it totally improbably, that one hit me the hardest in terms of like just euphoria as a fan, was that that took me off the couch. Literally. I was like I looked around, I was on the floor. I was like, well, how'd I get down here? That was so crazy. And then you kind of get a little bit, I guess, conditioned to the winning. And then the next championship, it's just not quite as, it just doesn't have quite the same appeal. So like I said, I've started to become a Premier League fan, and I'm rooting for, a Midland team that doesn't have a lot of money, that loses their best players to like the Yankees of London. You know what I mean? The equivalent. And so now some of that like underdog, because the Patriots were underdogs for so many years. That spirit of fandom is amazing. To have like an underdog-ish team that you can root for and believe in is such a cool feeling.
So something else that I believe in is that whole Podfather persona there, right? I got to know two things here. One, how did you come about that trademark of the Podfather? And two, is that Jojo there back there on your wall? I mean, you've got that green baboon type logo, that trademark in his tuxedo there. Kind of gives me like Powder Puff Girls, Mojo villain kind of.
Yeah, it's a werewolf. So it's a green werewolf drinking a martini. I just found it online. And it's a green werewolf drinking a martini. And yeah, that's the Podfather. He was wearing a tuxedo, and it feels like the Podfather. I'm sure it just came up on Twitter at some point, where someone just lobbed that. I mean, somebody. Then they called me the Brunch Father after that, because I was talking about how I don't set DFS lineup, someone else does it for me, and I go to brunch or something. Anyway, it just all worked. I kind of lucked into it, and I think the most important thing is just to listen to your audience. Early on, I was always reading all the comments on iTunes on the podcast, always, deep into Twitter, and just constantly listening to everybody that was part of the audience and what they wanted the site to be, what they thought was missing, what they wanted, what they liked about the show, what they didn't like about the show. So balancing what is good. Like, I feel like I also had listened to a lot of Dan Le Batard. The early Dan Le Batard show with Stu Gatz. Anyone that was familiar, like back when they were with The Ticket in Miami, back before even ESPN, was some of the best radio ever. And then Howard Stern and just a few of these influences. Joe Rogan. There's just different ways of approaching the audio medium and then moving into streaming, and the attitude you need to have to run your own show, and then basically just having a lot of respect for the audience, but also a lot of respect for yourself and your decision making and going down that line. I tried my show to not use a lot of the trappings of other shows, a lot of the same gimmicks. I try to be a unique show, but also, like, if you had listened to Dan Le Batard in like 2010, you would probably hear some echoes of like some of the shenanigans on my show. And the one theme with all those guys, like whether it's Howard, Rogan, Le Batard, they never aspired to be popular. They were never trying to make their show the biggest show. They were just themselves, and they built a loyal following around them because they were just out there being themselves and not taking the art of podcasting too seriously. Right? Oh, we're going to drink during the show. We're going to ask people to do crazy things. Or like Le Batard, not taking sports seriously, reminding people. I think that was a big thing, was reminding people that this is sports and it's not, geopolitics.
Right.
And we need to have fun with it. And especially if it's goddamn fantasy football, and now it's not even sports. It's like a game on top of another game. And if you're going to take that seriously, and not try to have a lot of fun with it, then we're not seeing eye to eye, I guess.
Can we dig a little deeper into the beginning of all this and talk about the trajectory of the website and everything? You said you took the 50K that you got day trading, and you started the site. What was it that triggered, like, hey, I want to do this site, instead of taking that money and putting it into like real estate or something else, you know?
When I was a kid, what I wanted to be when I grew up was a radio broadcaster, a sportscaster, and there was a little radio station in our high school that was in the basement, and it was all like smelled mildewy. No one ever used it. We had a very limited schedule, but I loved doing that. I remember that. And so it was my uncle was the voice of the Hornets for many, many years.
Nice.
And so I got to go sit on the bench with him at the scorer's table a few times with the headset on. I don't know, just had some awesome experiences, and was like, podcasting was starting to become a thing, you know? And I was like, yeah. So it was really that I wanted to do a podcast, and then I was trying to get myself organized to do a great podcast, and realized that there was a big missing piece, which was this unified place to get all this information that would be easily accessible during a podcast. So I did that. And then the podcast was sort of then informing people about the website, right? And talking about the website. And then, so I kind of launched them together. I was like, well, I can't do the podcast if I don't have this website now. I started had this weird thing in my head. I was like, I need to have this awesome tool that's at my disposal. And then I can show everybody what I'm looking at during the show. So it's this sort of elaborate idea for a show that also had a website behind it. Was the crux of the idea. And it was, the first few episodes were really just sort of professorial, talking about the stats and what they are and what they were derived from. Then at some point, I don't know what happened. I think it was my daughter's toy was there, and it was like something like this, where I just got it out. I just started breaking out of that structure and kind of doing whatever I wanted. And then I realized that I saw the audience tick up. I saw the feedback tick up. Right. And anyone that's thinking about like emailing a podcast host, especially any words of encouragement, please do that. Like, that was very huge for me early on.
You need it, huh?
When your podcast, everyone knows when you start off your podcast, you have like 80 people, right? Unless you're starting. I mean, I didn't have any Twitter followers either. I had nothing. Right. So I was just starting kind of from the ground level, talking into outer space, hoping that someone would link up that signal and listen. So all that feedback that I got from people, especially the direct communication, the emails that were like, I love what you're doing. You're on the right track. Your show is one of the things I look forward to the most. I mean, that's why I've stuck with it. And then there was a critical point a couple of years ago with the company where we got to a level that I had all these contractors working part-time, and then I knew, and I was making a good living, but I knew if we wanted to take things to the next level, I'd have to like make less money myself, but bring on a bunch of full-time people. And that was another sort of risk that I took along the way, was to do that. And it all sort of crescendos from all these people that are giving you this tailwind of support to go make these decisions, to say, yes, this is going to work. Yes, we're actually going to bring on full-time employees, and then you're responsible for them and their families. And it's a big responsibility. But I'm very glad I did it. And now we're building runway so that we can continue to expand, add new sports, go into new products, change Player Profiler to maybe be a little more of a social place where fans can interact. So there's a lot that's coming, but there was that decision point that I had to make a couple of years ago where I was like, hey, we could just be a football show. We could be doing a podcast, and I could be very successful. We have a Patreon, I'm living well. But I really think that the audience their support drove me to like a higher level of ambition. I don't think I would have done it without that.
Nice. Talk to us a little bit about some of the biggest changes from when you started to now in the industry, in the fantasy football industry.
Wow. Well, podcasting was just starting. That's the biggest thing. I mean, podcasting was just starting. And but a lot of things are just like Twitter was not what it is today. Twitter sort of, I think, reached a pinnacle a couple of years ago, fantasy Twitter. So, but not a lot has changed, really. Not a lot. I would go to ESPN. I would read Matthew Berry. Right now, there's so many choices
Right.
for places to go. There's Fantasy Points, which sponsors the show. There's Player Profiler. There's so many incredible places, and the bar has risen. Where when I got started, you really didn't need to have many skills. You just needed to be interested in fantasy football, and you could kind of go from there. Now, when people get started, technical skills are really important. Coding is really important to be able to take the analysis to the next level. And you see that being a new gateway that needs to be passed through for people to take things to the next level. And it's not impossible to learn R or learn Python, but I'm seeing more and more and more of the top analysts clearly have this skill set. And so the bar has risen. And then there's not as much green grass on social media and podcasting as there was when I got started. It's not as easy, but I still see people that want to put the work in, really getting traction on, like Alex Caruso on TikTok. There is a bunch of, Farad Siddiqui on Instagram, so Upper Hand Fantasy. So there's a bunch of different ways where if you decide you're going to grind, even if it's not as easy as green grass out there as it was, it's still rewarded, especially if you have something to say, and you have an interesting position to take. You'll be successful. And I look at, like, I can't believe that there seems to be so much green grass like in soccer, right? I mean, I know fantasy football is the behemoth, and certainly I'm very happy that that's the sport we chose. We could have started with a fantasy baseball site and been one of 7 of those sites, but I wasn't going to do that, even if I was. And I think at the time I probably was maybe a little more interested in fantasy baseball than I was fantasy football. But you have to follow your passion, but also make strategic decisions. In that, I didn't want to be another Fangraphs. I didn't want to wade into that space. There was a heck of a lot more green grass in the fantasy football space. So that needs to be part of your decision-making too. Bring the passion, bring the hard work, but also make some smart decisions about where the opportunities are. And when I look at the landscape right now, I see a lot of opportunity in golf. I see a lot of opportunity with soccer. Those are probably going to be 2 of the next sports that we focus on, are golf and soccer, for that reason. But also I'm passionate about, especially soccer. So I'm following that in one way, following the passion, but another way, following the marketplace, because there's a much bigger market right now for sports betting than there is for fantasy. The markets aren't even comparable. One is like $5 billion. One's like $100 billion, right? It's not even comparable. And if you sit down and you think about where a lot of money in sports betting is going to go in the next 5 years, the sport of golf is going to get a lot of it because it's every weekend and it's people that have money to spend and can be potentially high rollers. What are they passionate about? A lot of them are passionate about golf. Like, it's just, it is what it is. It's where the money is. It's where I think you're going to find, especially because you can wager on every round as well as the overall outcome. And it's every weekend all year. So you got to start to do the math and kind of back into it about where some of the best opportunities are. Pat Mayo was all over that. And Pat Mayo got into golf forever ago. And now he's reaping those rewards. Like for us, we got started focusing on players before prop bets were even a thing.
Right.
When everything was blog based. Now we've lucked into it in that suddenly the content needs to be a lot more player focused because of all the props. We just happen to have that already in place because that was the way I thought about fantasy football. And the way I did my analysis was much more player focused than team focused or coach focused. And now we look up and that focus or that prism through which you look at sports is being rewarded by the sports betting industry. So again, everything is 50-50 with hard work and luck. I didn't know, right? When we started Player Profiler, there were no sports betting wasn't even legal in New Jersey at that point. I had no idea. Now you see people that are rolling out companies just because they're trying to catch the sports betting wave. And that's not going to cut it. It needs to be partly a passion project and then partly a passion project that you then, take in a strategic direction, but building something from the ground up just because you're chasing a trend, that's typically not going to work in the end.
We've seen all these different avenues, like you said, what open up TikTok, Instagram. Then you mentioned DFS has been a huge thing over the last 10 years. Kind of
almost forgot DFS.
Yeah, DFS. You talk about sports betting; it's been right there. Then you've got your golf. You've got your soccer now. Like you said, is one of those untapped resources out there right now that
untapped,
not
baby.
a lot of people are covering. So we know all that, and I can talk about we can talk about burnout. We can talk about how you recharge. We can talk about the grind. But I want to know, what is something that many people probably don't realize about you?
Well, first I'll say that the burnout factor is real. Like, we started in 2014, and grinding football all day, every day for 8 years is a lot. Like, you can't do it forever. And so I am very happy. I'm going to be very happy when we are a multi-sport platform. And I have been feeling a sense of rejuvenation in becoming a Premier League fan and talking about it, doing a show about it, having some articles written about it, eventually doing player pages and doing the whole thing right. So that's the way to combat that. Is you gotta break through the innovator's dilemma, and even if you think that you might be cannibalizing your own product or you think you might be straying away from what works, you got to take those chances sometimes, man. It's the only way you're gonna stay ahead of the possibility of burnout. What people don't necessarily know about me in particular, I don't know. I mean, the one thing that I'm really proud of is that there's, I think, an incredible base of contributors at every level, from full-time employees down to those that have written 1 or 2 articles. And I can't think of anyone that's had a bad interaction working with us and our team. Even those that have left the company, like we had our first full-time employee leave, Josh Larkey. We did a whole podcast, a 3-hour podcast when he was leaving, just wishing him well and talking about his whole journey and really embracing it, because I know I've been on the other side where I've left and the leader of the company was not cool about it. Right. And somehow felt like it was a slight against him that I was leaving. And when I first heard that Josh was leaving, I was like, ah, man, it is like, it does hurt you. And it's an ego blow for sure. But if you can just recognize, oh, wait, my ego's getting a bit touched up here. This sucks. But if you can take a step back and go, all right, let me put myself as quickly as possible in his shoes and what he's thinking, and be sure to first and foremost have what's in his best interest in mind, and try to understand where he's coming from. The sooner you can get into that mode, the sooner then it can be a good experience. And then one day, you got to remember, there's a hidden cost to being an asshole to people. I like to criticize people on air, right? So if you're gonna come at me, or I'm gonna disagree with you, I'm gonna say it publicly. Behind the scenes, my goal is that there would never be any beef or reason to have issue with me, that in terms of how I do business or how I interact. So I take a lot of pride in having a very high bar there. And then all the shit disturbing can happen publicly as part of the spectacle, as part of the entertainment side of what we're doing. But behind the scenes, I'm not that sort of bloviating caricature, right? That I'm just a real dude that's just trying to do his best and trying to do what's in the best interest of everybody. Because I think that, let's say with Josh, for example, he might a year from now have some interaction, and he might refer someone to us, and it becomes a big win for us.
Right.
Right. Whereas if he had a bad experience leaving, he's not going to do that. He might even go out of his way to do the opposite.
Right.
And then these are hidden costs that I would never experience, lost opportunities I would never know about. That is the price of bad behavior. Now you can overcome it. Like we once had a president that overcame being a total asshole to most people, especially people that did work for him, right? Not paying your bills and forcing people to sue you, and sure, that can work if you're some next level demigod type of person. Most people, though, can't get away with that, right? Most people can't get away with that. If you treat people poorly behind the scenes, eventually that shit's going to come home to roost. And, those little micro edges that you were picking up when you were grinding people into dirt along the way, those are going to come back and haunt you. I fully believe that. So that's a sort of just a general approach to the world that I have that, don't really talk about too much. So.
No, that's absolutely, you're absolutely right about all of that. This question, I don't know, it kind of feels like you were born to do this, but if you weren't doing the podcast, the website, and all that good stuff, what would you be doing?
I was doing little shows in my fantasy league, man. I was turning the camera on, and I would put on I would don a character like a eye patch.
Let's go deeper. Let's take off fantasy football together.
I'm just telling you, when I had worked a regular corporate job,
you were doing.
I was putting on an eye patch, and I had a little like a knife, and I was like, had like a pirate voice, like, "Arr!" And I was taunting my league mates about this pickup that I made on the waiver wire, and I made the video and I sent it out to the, to the whole group. And that was essentially, I was just doing my thing, but so I just think, I don't know. I
think you were born for that. I think you were born for this.
I can't, I was doing this before. I was basically doing this before in my fantasy leagues. And those that are out there don't be discouraged because you think it's all plowed ground. It's not. You should try to start creating some content if that's been, if you've been that guy, if you've been the the guy that's trying to be the shit disturber in your league. You could probably get an audience doing that. I guess, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I could see the one thing I really do enjoy is helping anyone that's creating like a digital experience. I really dig into the art of making things simple and clean and easy on a phone or on the on your browser. And I did that before in my corporate life. I was a user experience
So, like,
maven. So I would
streamlining things? Is that what you're talking about? Like, making things more
right,
like
like
simple, I guess?
so someone has an idea for or a customer has a request for, hey, I would like this tool, this online tool to do X, Y, and Z.
Gotcha.
And then you got to be able to design the buttons and you got to be able to design how it's going to look, how it's going to feel. To the point where with our Dynasty Dominator app, when you look players up, this was like a not an off the shelf functionality. I really wanted there to be a haptic feedback where there would be like a ticking in your phone, like you would feel it vibrating and ticking as the guy was going up the scale. And I was like, we need haptic feedback. We need haptic feedback. And then my mobile developer was like, that doesn't exist, or that's never been done in this situation. And I was like, but the whole experience will just be better if the phone is kind of ticking when it's going up. And I'm like, I know I've seen this in another. So seeing what's working other places and then making it work somewhere else, or kind of changing it, transforming it into something that is fun and engaging. In one of my jobs, I took like super boring stuff, like employee onboarding training, the stuff you sleep through when you start a job and you're just going through the motions, like those kind of experiences, trying to make that fun and not suck. I had a lot of fun with. So that's part of, I guess, player profiler. When people go to player profiler, they see something that looks like a spaceship landed, or that is designed in a way that they think is cool for whatever reason. They can't put their finger on it. That's the biggest compliment, because that's something that so I think if it's some job where I would help people, no matter what kind of, it was a dog food company, whatever it is, right, wants to do a mobile app or something, improve the experience. I love doing that kind of stuff. Yeah, sure.
That's awesome.
What have you learned through fantasy football? And more importantly, maybe what has fantasy football in particularly taught you about yourself?
That I can sit in a chair for 3 hours and talk.
But how much fluids can you consume that 3 hours and stay in that chair?
Yeah, yeah, man. I mean, I've had some late nights cranking out rankings and podcasts and stuff, like past midnight. And even now, you get in your 40s, it's not as easy. But I just did it a couple nights ago. I was just up late last night doing the soccer podcast, and I was loving every minute of it. And I'm laughing to myself, at the sound effects or whatever, the outtakes. So, yeah, I mean, that I learned that I have the ability, because for many years in college, I think I talked about this on my podcast once, about how I bailed on my senior thesis in college and didn't even do it. And then there was a paperwork snafu, and I still got the major,
Nice.
great, lucked out. But really, really had a hard time working hard. My work ethic was not great for a very long period of time. And then, so that was a great thing to learn that about yourself, that you have the ability to work hard. I didn't know that for decades, right? Because I went to college with some guys that were like pre-med, and they were just horses. They could go to the library for 8 hours, man. And I'm in there for an hour, like, I'm bored, dude. I can't do this. I can't do it. God bless you. I'm glad you're the one that's doing surgery, right? Thank you.
Yeah.
These are the people you want doing surgery, right? They went through a lot to get that degree. God bless them. But I wasn't that. I didn't, So to learn 20 years later that I have that ability to work really hard and really grind was a cool moment. It just had to find something that I cared enough about, which was my own show.
You know what, though?
Only
When
thing
we
I
look
care
at
about
things,
is myself.
but see, yeah, the show, and it shows the work, the effort you put into that. But the other thing is those relationships have come out of there, right? I've talked to so many people that have crossed your path. You've mentioned Cody and Josh. Jacob Sanderson's another guy that come to mind that you've helped give that platform
Canadian.
to. Canadian Winnipeg boy. He's just
There you go.
He's just a couple provinces over from me here right now. So
yeah, otherwise known as 7,000 miles.
yeah, pretty much. We like to spread it out. We don't. Canadians, people get this confused. They say Canadians love all the time, love each other, but we spread right across, right? We don't want to be that close to one another. But you mentioned these relationships, and I mentioned those three names off the top of my head who I've kind of interacted with. And there's obviously been those
all great guys, all great guys.
Fantastic people, probably better people than analysts, and they're pretty darn good analysts when it's all said and done. But we talk about these relationships and how I know you've helped these guys kind of gain that platform. But who were some of those that kind of came before you to kind of push you a little bit further?
Well, it's this, these guys that it was such a big deal when Evan Silva came on my podcast. That was huge. And then he tweeted about people to follow me. That was gigantic. That I needed something. I needed a wider audience to know about me and to kick the ball off, right? Start the game. And he did that. He did it. You need to get some attention drawn to you to start the process of creating some word of mouth and creating some network effects. And he was the first guest on the podcast. He totally helped me out. He had like 100,000 plus followers at the time at Roto World.
Wow.
And so I'll always be super grateful for that. That was, I mean, there's no second place to his first appearance on the podcast and him tweeting about it.
Man,
period.
That's
easy answer.
And last question here. Give some advice. I mean, you gave great advice already. I hope people are taking notes, but give us some advice to those trying to make it in the industry, or you could just spin it and give us some life advice.
Yeah. So another thing is, if you talk about the audience emailing, right?
We might be DMing now. I don't know. Email might be a little old, man. I don't know.
Whatever. DM, email, same thing. Don't be shy to DM people and email people. All they can say is no. Right. So, I mean, my two backgrounds really are sales and like user experience. And, I've used them both in different ways, to help sponsors or whatever, or just explain to people how they could use our site to their advantage. And, one of the lessons I learned early on was, what's the worst that could happen? They could say no. They could ignore you. You're really that fragile. You can't take that. So there's been tons of opportunities that I just reached out to people. I just reached out to Evan and said, hey, you want to come on my podcast? So what if I have 80 people listening? Like, I'm just gonna, he can say no, or he could say yes. He might say yes. So, and a lot of people that work for us now are people that originally at one point wrote me one of these like 3-paragraph emails talking about some observation they made about Player Profiler and how they'd like to make it better in these ways, or, something they heard on the show and it led to this, and maybe they want to write an article. And, one of the guys that does he's our social media director, Aaron Stewart. We had a social media director that was getting done. He just couldn't deal with the being a full-time student and doing the social media at the same time. His studies were starting to really bear down on him. So I was like, oh my God, am I going to have to start doing all the social media again? That's fine, but I wouldn't love that. Literally the same day, that evening, Aaron Stewart sent me an email and he's like, hey, I've written a bunch of articles. I enjoy it, but I just want to make sure that you know that I'm available if you need more help in any way. I'm, and here's the reasons why I think in various ways I could help and why I'm a good candidate. Just throwing it out there. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is like a message in a bottle.
Timing.
Like washing up on shore. I'm opening up going, holy shit. Right. And I was like, your timing couldn't be better, my friend. My answer is yes. Right. I don't know what motivated him to send that email, man. I don't know. But there's been a ton of that
Awesome.
back through the last, like I said, 8 years. Either me sending an email out of nowhere to someone and it getting a great response, or vice versa, me receiving an email or a DM from someone and it just, the timing is perfect. So just keep doing that. And don't be discouraged if a bunch of people ghost you. Doesn't matter. Like, so what? 4 people ghost you. The 5th person, the timing might be right. Problem is maybe their settings are configured in a way they never even saw your DM.
Right.
Or the timing wasn't quite right, or whatever. Who knows? Don't stop reaching out and, just putting the value proposition that you can bring to the table and getting it known to the world. That's my advice. And that's it.
You know what? I love that. That kind of sums up everything, because we know how fear can be crippling, and we know that fear is a liar, and it really sets people back. I mean, I remember before I started sliding in DM. Now I got no problem sliding into people's DMs, or like you said, sending those emails. But that first DM, you're like, okay, should I send this? Should I not? What if they say no? And you kind of beat yourself up about it, and on and on and on. But as soon as you get that first yes, once that first one comes in, then it just snowballs and it takes off, and that confidence builds and builds and builds. And now I don't know how many times I've been rejected, probably 20 times, or ghosted, like you said. But I've also had 100, 200 people say, yeah, I'll come on the show, or yeah, this is this, or hey, call me whenever you want. I mean, I like that 200 to 20, that 100 to 10. I don't know. I'm not good at math, but
well, I will say though, the nice thing about having some success is now, if I ask people to be on the show, if they say no, I'm fucking shocked.
See how it reverses? That's
now I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah, like what is you? What? You know who I am? No,
really?
Okay. You say no to me? Are you saying no to me?
I don't know. That's a good idea.
You guys are funny, man.
With that all being said, hey, make sure you're checking out Matt Kelley here and the Podfather here and everything they're doing over at the Prospect Profiler, that podcast. And hey, he's got that newfound love, that newfound soccer, whatever you want to call it. It's going down. And
Football.
Profile, they're going to be one of the first in on this, so you're going to want to get with them.
Oh, important fact here, Major. Important fact. Did you know that old men and women in the United Kingdom call it soccer?
That is new to me.
It is an English word.
I thought it was FU football.
No, it's an English word. The first soccer league was called the Association, and they shortened it to just soccer, right? So that was what they called it in England for many years, decades, 100 years. And then Americans started using it, and then when we start to co-opt a word or phrase, Europeans want nothing to do with it. They run it. So they decided, so England had to make a choice. Are we going to go with what the Europeans, the continent calls it, or the Americans? And of course they went with the continent. So they're like, we're going to align ourselves with what the Spanish people call it. And because this has too much of an American stink on it. So that's what happened to soccer, man. So all Americans say it proudly, soccer. Okay.
Soccer.
Say it. That's the original word for it. And just know that's what, the old guy in the pub, he's calling it soccer too. in Birmingham. So don't worry about it.
I had no idea. That's some good stuff. Did you just learn that because you're getting into it, or you already
I'm watching
level up,
documentaries, bro. I'm reading books. You know it.
Hey, you know what? And with that all being said, I've learned a valuable lesson to respect my elders. So, Major, I will respect you for the rest of this show. And with that said, this has been the Dynasty Vipers Vipercast, episode 125, presented by the Fantasy Points Media Group. If you want 10% off that subscription at fantasypoints.com, use promo code Vipers22, and we got you covered. We will see you next time. Matt, thanks for joining us. Major, see you next week.
Peace.